Alright guys, I got set up just like you will for the sphere. I've got the drawing paper here, and then I have, just like you will have, up on my screen the exact same thing that you will, so it's doing it how you are, that way it feels consistent. You're going to be using charcoal pencil, and I talked to you about last time about erasing with the kneaded eraser, and also using, the X-Acto knife to sharpen with the sandpaper block if you need to. Do that the traditional way. That works really well. It's the way they're designed, but also if you have to, the pencil sharpener is fine too. Just be careful not to drop these pencils because the charcoal inside gets shattered pretty easily, I should say. Want that kneaded eraser still. This is going to be something we're going to use in quite a bit with the charcoal. And you just knead it together like silly putty or clay or anything, I guess. Gum. It's sort of like gum but not sticky, to get rid of the charcoal, and blends in. Over time, as you use it more, it would get darker and darker gray. So you have your paper. You could use a pencil if you wanted to lightly sketch some of this out, but it's not necessary. I'm going to be posting a video that's like an hour long after this one by another drawing instructor from a drawing resource center that I like. But I'm not going to do a whole hour because I want to give you a chance to either watch how I'm doing it and try it out and see if this would be enough information for you, which most people would be. If you're feeling like you're still not understanding it or your result isn't turning out, then go ahead and watch that whole hour uh, video, because it'll help you with some different things. Maybe some of it isn't clear, but I don't want everyone to have to be watching hour-long videos all in a row. I'd prefer it to be shorter steps, like 25 minutes, and then try things and then go back to it, because it breaks it up a little easier, makes it more interesting. So you're going to want to just carefully just create your cube. I said sphere. And you can just kind of lightly rough it in. Okay, very lightly. And as you can see in your drawing, there's a line in the back that goes up at an angle, and it kind of goes, if we do our angle measuring like that. Okay, you can move your paper around as you draw your sketchbook. It's not like you have to keep it always like this. It's good to sometimes move a little bit. And then you're going to want to keep your eraser handy to kind of clean things up as you go. But that's a really light line. Now, also right away you're going to want to notice in your drawing, in the photograph, I should say photograph, not drawing, that there's a cast shadow and a light source. And the light source is coming from about there in the drawing. So sometimes it's a really good idea up at the corner here to give yourself an indication of the light source. It'll help you. Because the highlight's about right here. I'm measuring it with my eye. I can measure it with my hand on the drawing or the screen. I keep saying drawing. I mean, on the drawing I can measure it, and also on the reference photograph I can measure it like this and see about how far it is over, just like you've been doing for proportional measuring. But that's the highlight. And then you're going to want to notice that I kind of got this a little bit too round, so I'm going to just kind of take a little off there. Kind of go, okay. I'm going to check that and kind of go, okay, I got to get a little more circle. Because if you put your hand up and measure that thing on the screen, you'll notice that it's about the same height and width, because it's a real sphere. So there would fit inside of a cube, touching at 4 points, or a little bit more than 4 exact points, but 1, 2, 3, 4, if it was inside of a cube. So it's got to be the same height and width like a cube. And then you're going to want to try to kind of figure out where the shadow is. It looks like it's about a third of the way up that it hits. In life, if we were in class, you'd be drawing one of these from life. And you notice that the light's hitting there, so I can kind of tell where the edge of my shadow is going to be over here, because the light's going, I can trace with my eye and my pencil over hanging out, the light's going to be there. If the light hits there, then on the opposite side, there's going to be a shadow. So I can see that it's going to work like that pretty well. The image is, yep, it's pretty accurate. It shows a little bit of a secondary shadow in the image. That's fine. If you want to try to get that, you can, but I want you to first focus on that primary shadow, the really dark one. And this is sort of in the image a little bit of extra light bouncing around over there. Okay, so that's that. Now I'm going to want to kind of identify where the core of the shadow is. And it looks like it's about a little bit less than half. So if I go like this, half is about right there. So it's going to be kind of coming up through this way. Oops. Get this a little off there. Got it. Yeah, I got that there. It's not perfect, but I can keep adjusting it. It's kind of hard to draw for the camera because in person I have you guys moving around and I'm on a drawing horse, but I'm always trying to keep it in the view of the camera, and it's a little bit hard because I don't have a giant camera I can use. Okay, so there's that, and then I know the reflected light is going to be back in here on this image. I can see that there's some reflected light in this area. So I'm just going to give it a little hash mark and mark it off. And some here. So that's the reflected light all along the edge. The core shadow is because it's hitting lower down, it's going to be like right here, and right here is the core shadow. Okay, so I got a lot of things marked off. I want to also notice that the brightest spot is going to be there. I got that marked off. And over here it's really bright as well because the light is hitting this reflective surface. To define some of the edges, like in the video I show you that I will share, they use also shading behind in the background. You can do that. Some people do that, some people don't. It's kind of up to you. And it also depends upon, I guess I should actually say, it's not up to you. It depends upon the nature of what you're drawing and the kind of space. And this I will do it because there's not anything really back there. And it's one solid tone. But if I was drawing like a bunch of objects in space and I didn't really want to focus on the background because the drawing, I might not like worry about shading some of the background necessarily. And I'm kind of getting in the weeds, but I'm talking about still lifes. You don't necessarily always shade around objects is the point that I'm going to be making. So we're going to start to kind of build this up really lightly. And I'm just going to work just like I did with the value scale, really lightly at first, and build up that shadow side. I'm actually like almost just barely skipping my charcoal pencil over the surface. I'm trying not to give myself too many directional lines because I don't want to make it like where the mark making is overwhelming it. If I do need to show some on the edge, I want them to go in line with the contour of the sphere. And it looks like I'm kind of getting sketchy. I am, but I'm actually not because I'm keeping my pencil on charcoal pencil on the page the whole time. So even though I'm doing short strokes, I'm not lifting and getting crazy. I'm making sure I'm controlling where the value is. I'm going to keep doing that, and here, this is already getting a little dull for me, so I'm going to switch to my other pencil I created. I got a couple of them sharp. And I'm going to do that with the side of it. And I got a little too dark already right there, so I'm just going to come back in and get rid of some of it. And I'm going to come back in here and crisp up and decide where the edge of my cube and shadow is, because this is going to be really dark. If you notice, I'm not working on this right away, because I want to be able to adjust this to match perfectly. So I'm not going to sit there and shade the whole cast shadow right away. First I'm going to figure out the cube. Okay, so the cube, I keep saying the cube, I mean the sphere. I don't know why I keep saying cube. Probably because I said cube earlier about that this would fit inside of a cube. Okay, so if you look at your picture and look what I'm doing, you'll see that I'm trying to keep where that reflected light is. I'm trying to keep it white right now, because I don't want to overwhelm this whole process to the point where I am going too dark on it. And I'm seeing that, okay, now that I have that pretty well established, I gotta come in here and add some tone, because it's not going to be white. The only thing that's going to be really white is the highlight in some of the table, because this is all shades of gray in here. So I'm actually going to add that in because it's lighter, and I'm going to go in here and make sure I darken up my core shadow, and I'm just going to keep building this. That's what I'm doing, is deciding where those kind of darker and lighter areas are. I'm building it up. The core shadow. If you notice when you squint your eyes and look at the sphere, that the core shadow is not quite as dark as the darkest part of the cast shadow, but up here it does get pretty close. So I can really keep adding value. I'm adding value and squinting and looking, and adding value and squinting and looking. And I'm making sure that I'm just being really careful to build this up. It's getting closer and closer, but it's not quite there yet at all. I have a long way to go. So I'm going to pause this so you don't have to watch the whole thing every step of the way in real time fully. And I'm going to work on it a little bit more, and then I'll turn it back on and tell you what it was doing. So I'm still deep in the process, and I started to blend this more and define the edge where I like for the edge of the cast shadow down here. And up here, I was really trying to define the edge of that core shadow. I'm going to keep building this up, but I realize that for me, it's going to be useful to kind of get a little bit of the light gray that's going to be the background setup. On the picture, there's that part behind the white, so that I kind of have something to compare the light part of the sphere to, because it's lighter than the background. So I kind of want to establish that. I did it just a little bit of it. I'm not going to do all of it right away, but I want some of it up there. So I can also define the edge of the white too by doing that, this really light part. And so I'm going to keep working and building up the tones. I also came in here and realized that my edge down here was getting a little funny, so I started to kind of tighten it up a little bit, like I said, with the charcoal, like the part that's the shadow that's closest, so I could erase the extra parts that don't really, these extra lines are getting a little funny, so I didn't want them there to confuse me, so I tighten that up, and then I can erase like I just did. I'm going to keep building it up like this, and I want to think when I'm doing this. I'm trying to tell you guys how do I do this, but I got to think about the fact that this is a real object in the round, which means shadows are going to go over the edge, not just stop like lines. They're actually, cascading around the object. And so my lines of shadow and things like that need to follow the contour of the form. I'm doing a drawing, which is by definition an abstraction of something, but it needs to follow that form, the shape of it in the photograph, that real object that was photographed. So that means don't just have it go up to a line, and you need to follow those curves of things. So it seems, at first everyone's like, oh, this is so easy, but then once you start doing it, you're like, oh, actually, okay. is going to take some time because you got to really get in there and blend the edges and pay attention to where things are shifting. Keep looking at the photograph, and sometimes I'm laying out like a little bit of a tone really lightly, and then I'm coming in and I'm doing some smearing in a few spots with my finger, or I could use my tortillon. So I'm going to show you what a tortillon is. It's also called blending stump. They come in different sizes, but they look like paper that you can blend with. The only thing about them that's a problem is as soon as you start blending, you can quickly do what you call burnishing, where the paper gets like really, really, really almost like bright because you're polishing down all the fibers in it. So you don't want to do that. Otherwise, you won't be able to add any more medium charcoal to the. You won't be able to add any more of the charcoal to it. So you want to do it lightly and work. And I'm just going to do that a little bit to kind of get some of the lighter spots. But I am going to go back in and use my pencil to do the line work too. But I want to just kind of get some of that in. We do this, like I said to you before, it kind of looks, you'll see it after a while if you look at a lot of drawings. It can look pretty amateur if you just smear everything. But if you render things, you have different levels to a drawing. So you're having like values that you maybe smear and build up, but then over the top you're creating line work with texture and things. This cube doesn't have a lot of texture, so a lot of it could really be smeared. But later on when we do like things, you want the line work to also define texture and the width of the line and that's the line weight and things like that to make sense for what you're drawing too. So you have to remember we are doing drawings. We're doing observational drawings. We're going for naturalism and realism, but we're not going for photorealism. It's still a drawing. We're not trying to, you could do that if you want, learn to do that, but drawings usually are meant to be known as drawings overall. You're like, yeah, of course, well, it seems obvious, but I think it's important to remind ourselves because it's easy to kind of get into sometime when we're doing this, like, oh, this is not perfect. I can tell I can see the marks. I can tell it's still got the charcoal on the drawing. Well, that's part of the beauty of drawing is that it is made by hand. It has the quality of the hand as a part of it. It's naturalistic. It's real feeling. We can tell more or less what it is. And even, we're going to get drawings in this class that feel pretty realistic, but we're not really going for like photorealism. We're going for accurate observation through our methods of sighting and seeing and measuring for proportions. And then this is part of that too. We're going for accurate observations of tonal values through squinting our eyes and looking and seeing where things change. But we're not trying to make people fooled into believing we're making that these are photographs. And you can see I'm blending. I'm getting a little crazy. I'm noticing over here I got way too much charcoal on over there because I'm talking and blending. So I can take my kneaded eraser and make it into like a pencil. Not a pencil. Make it into a tip that I could use to actually kind of like draw with, or I should say draw by pulling off some of the charcoal that went everywhere. And I'm going to especially use, I want one spot right in there to be like that I marked earlier. That's going to be the highlight. So everything else has to have more tone than that. And it's also down here in the drawing as well. So I got to, that means I'm going to need to add more tone to other places. And I have quite a bit of charcoal on my tortillon, my blending stump, so I can use that to add some back in. And get really careful with that. Highlight, but there's a whole section here, it just has to be pretty bright. and I'm really squinting my eyes and looking at it, and there's shapes of tone. I'm not just randomly doing this. It's right there, there's a shape. I'm trying to match the shape. It's a lot brighter at this very first part here and up here. And this in here got too dark, so I'm going to come and just barely dab it. That little bit's looking pretty good, but I got a little too dark down here, so I'm just going to dab it and pull it back. And this one just has a little too much of a tail, so I'm going to pull that. It looks like it has a tail right there. I'm going to pull the tail back, and right there, it's supposed to have reflected light going up a little higher. So I'm going to pull that in. And I'm just building it a little at a time. Just barely touching to build up the values and the changes. I'm not going to be afraid to get the darkest darks, which are up here, into this thing. There's a whole section up here that's really dark. Almost as dark as the... I'm keeping the edge soft because I don't want it to look like a line on it, which means I'm kind of not sketchy, but I'm scratchily is the wrong word. I'm carefully doing the line work where it's just hovering on the surface of the paper, barely touching, because I don't want it to get too dark of a line. Like, I don't want it to be like that on the cube, right? And I can take and blend some of this because this is a pretty smooth cube. And blend that in. I don't like that little line because it looks like a pattern on the cube. Okay, there's a coarse shadow in here. I'm going to try to build up. That's too dark. So I'm just going to keep dabbing it to get rid of some of that. And build up that coarse shadow right there. That's the squeak of the charcoal hitting the page. So that's, that's looking pretty good. It's coming along. It's coming together more and more. I'm not happy with how it looks like there's a halo around the highlight. So I'm going to come in here and take and just barely start to add a little bit more and move that around with my blending stump. Now, if you don't have a blending stump and you don't want to pay for them, what you can do is just take a piece of paper towel. We'll get some and show you what I do. So that's that. You can do that. You just take a piece of paper towel or paper towel, part of it, and then you just carefully roll it, and this will create it just like anything else. I think, it's not as precise as if you bought one of those toward ones, but it works perfectly fine, and not everyone wants to pay for those for this class. And sometimes I actually almost like it better because I can control, I can get it really small. If you have like more like paper towels you get from like a bathroom that are like more papery, mine's are really soft. They actually work really even better because you can make them harder and kind of like compress them more, is I guess what I'm trying to say. Like there's different types of paper towels. At my house they're not quite as good because they're a little softer. Probably feels nice on our hands but doesn't compress as well for this sake. So you can see how I'm taking some off. I don't want it to be like there's a halo right there on the highlight. So what I'm doing is it in focus? There we go. I just blended it around it so that I could come in and just take off the highlight like that. There's a brightest spot right there. I want it to be really bright. That's almost white. The paper, it should be paper white. But there's only really one spot there, and then there's some right here at the front, and then at the very top edge right up here. This is where you kind of use your kneaded eraser to shape. Up there, there's some. And this whole edge is pretty bright. It's not quite pure white, but really close. And then down here, there's a section with the light striking on the table that's like pure white. So you can see how you're going to want to get the table also because that it's sitting on, because then you can really control the environment and make it look, well, not you're creating the environment to make it look like it's in space, and then you're really controlling the values all around the whole sphere by doing this. Because when you see that, you're like, okay, that's like really bright. This whole section is pretty bright, so you're going to want to take it off. And you're building up this whole picture plane of value. And the more you watch, you're going to say, okay, this is going to take me longer than I thought just to do a sphere, because it takes a while to really spend time observing something and to really like get accurate with the shapes and the values that you're seeing. And you don't want it to look like it's hairy or has a texture on it. You want it to look like it's part of the shading, the shade on the subject, not like a weird pattern over it. And if it doesn't look like it's the right shapes from life, then it will end up looking like a pattern, because it won't make any sense, because our brain has seen so many things for so long in life, like in shade, seen so many things shaded, that we actually innately do know how it should be. The problem is when we're trying to recreate it, we have to spend time learning to control our hand and really see what's happening in a way that will help us recreate it. But if we really look at it quickly, our eyes know how light works, and so if something's not right, we can tell it's not right usually, but we don't know what's not right. And so that's part of the purpose of what we're doing in this class, is learning to figure out, it's not that we can't see that it's not right or that we can't see the subject. It's that we don't know what we did wrong, so to speak, what's not working. And so we're trying to learn how to identify those things so we can fix them. And part of that is really learning to not let yourself say, oh, it's good enough, fine, it's whatever, it's good enough. It's really about saying, well, it's not right, let me see if I can keep fixing it. And we're all learning and growing and have our abilities. I also am even just every time I draw, I'm getting better and learning things and realizing things. I've been drawing for a long time and teach it, have my MFA, but it doesn't really matter because there's always new things I could be learning, unless I just want to do exactly what I always did before, which to me isn't fun at all, to just kind of repeat myself over and over again and draw the same thing the same way. I don't mind drawing the same thing. I even posted a video about how it might be a good idea creatively to try to draw the same thing or study something the same way for a while, the same thing, but do it different ways and check it out, because it can help you see it from different angles. But I don't just want to repeat, part of learning is learning new ways to do things and growing in the skills, and so it takes observation and time and energy and planning. And you've signed up for this course, so your time is already set aside. If you didn't set this time aside, then even though it's online, that's not going to work super well. So you got to set the time aside, because it's a class just like it would be even if it was in person. So the time is set aside. Harder when it's at home maybe, but it is. And so you got to give yourself the chance to really draw by just saying, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm sticking it out in the moment, not get too frustrated or annoyed about it, but help myself calm down and just see what's happening here and keep working it through a little at a time and seeing how it keeps getting better. I just keep looking and noticing what needs to be done, comparing it to the picture. It's getting better and better every step of the way, blending it. So I think you're starting to see the kind of process that I'm building up. I'm trying to really smooth things. There's reflected light right in here. That's that reflected light. It's not quite dark enough. It's looking a little too close to that over there, so I can either lighten this up a lot, but it's pretty light already, which means I really need to darken up my reflected light a little bit better. And right down here on this edge, it's pretty dark too. So I just need to kind of come in there and really hit that very edge because the reflected light isn't hitting right in there as much. So that's pretty good. And if I look at the shadow, the core, there's a part of the shadow inside the shadow that's even darker because there's two light sources. It has a little bit of lightness in the shadow right there. And as it goes away from the object, it gets a little bit not quite as dark because the light is traveling and bouncing around. So I'm building it up a bit by bit, and that's the process. The same with the surface of the table here. You don't have to take and draw all the table, but you do want to get, oops, it's too dark of a line. You do want to get some of it in, so you can use the blending stump if you wanted to. Get yourself some of that table so you can kind of feel the space around it, like I said. Yeah, there's that. More space. I really don't want to mess with the edge of this shadow right there. I want to keep that really nice and crisp, the cut line. So I'm gonna be careful when I'm blending around that and up to it. I'm using my pencil around that area because I really don't want to, I want to keep certain things very crisp. That's one of the things in this whole drawing that's especially crisp, is that shadow, that cut line of the shadow. So that's getting a little bit too much like a pattern because the charcoal pencil lines are showing a lot. And so that's building that up. It's getting more and more real by the moment. I'm getting closer and closer to it. But, you know, it's not perfect. It's not as good as I can do it yet. And I've only been working on it for about, 30 to 40 minutes. So for this class, you have a couple hours of, you have like almost 4 hours of lab time. Plus you would usually have a little bit of homework. So this stuff is supposed to take you a while. It's not supposed to be, like we'd usually have 10:30 to 5 hours in class almost. And the lecture is supposed to be about an hour each class. So you have about, 3 hours of lab time almost, plus homework time makes it about 3 hours. So this stuff's supposed to take you a while. It's not supposed to be something you can whap out in like 5 minutes if you're doing it correctly. So part of this whole thing is it can be maybe a peaceful exercise and like chilling and just doing something specific, focusing on that, and it can be really enjoyable when with the way the world is in general, and any time of the year, all the time. It's the world around us can be really fast-paced or hectic or maybe frightening in different ways. So sometimes drawing can be a really nice way to spend some time just being in the moment and relaxing a little bit. So maybe for me it is anyway. And so I think that this could be an enjoyable thing for you, possibly. A little bit philosophical there, but I think the intention of what I'm saying is just try to let yourself just relax into the process of drawing and don't get too worried about if it's looking right at first or anything. Not if it's looking right, if you're doing it well enough, don't worry about that, and just keep looking and seeing what's in front of you and adjusting it and seeing if it looks right when it's observational drawing. And don't get too worried about, can I do it or not? Just keep plugging away at it is what I'm trying to tell you. Okay? So that's getting pretty accurate. More and more and more. I got to pull a little bit off up here and keep going with this, but I think I'm not going to go any further. I want to say this is, 90% of the way there. I'm not going to go any further in the video because we're at 35 minutes and I don't, like I said, I don't want you to have to watch an hour and a half. But if it's not making sense, then I want you to watch the other lecture. You can probably skip a little bit of the first part of it and then go on to the end of it. This says full sphere. It's a full sphere exercise video. It actually is called, let me see here, in the module, it is called Demonstration of a Sphere in Full Value, is this video that you're watching right now. And then I'm going to put another video that is called Second Long Format Demonstration. It'll be called Long Format Demonstration of a Sphere in Full Value. So it'd be the longer one. And it'll help you out if you'll get a lot of information out of that too. It's by someone else, and I think it's interesting because you can hear different people's ways of talking and doing it. That can be helpful as well. Okay, so I hope you're staying well out there, and I do really, really want to say to you guys, please reach out with questions. If you have questions, I really want to help you. So pronto me, email me, set up a Zoom appointment with me, but if you don't ask, I can't really help you because I don't know what's going on unless you show me some stuff and ask for help. Okay? Take care, guys.